Good evening, everyone. As you are filing in, we do ask that if you can move up a little bit closer. We want to make sure that you can hear. For those that are in the back, give me a wave just to let me know the volume's okay back there. Good. All right, so we're all right back there. We're going to get our program started here in just about a minute. So if you can go ahead, find a seat, we're going to go ahead and we will start here very shortly. Well, good evening, everyone. One more time, good evening, everyone. All right, I know some of you may have had a long, exhausting day at work, but hopefully this will not be a long, exhausting evening. We're hoping to share a plethora of information with you on this evening. I'm Reverend Tony Alexander, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the Northwest CRDC, that is the Northwest Community Resource District Council. And the Northwest CRDC is one of 6 across the city of Indianapolis. Our Northwest CRD, we are, you can say, tied to the Northwest District. And we have our commander who's here for the Northwest District. So thank our commander for showing up on today. And we have our chief as well of police. He's here as well. He's going to be sharing, but we're thankful for all of you that have joined us for our forum on tonight, our town hall roundtable. And we are privileged and we're blessed to be able to have joining us this evening from the Department of Justice, we have Zach Myers representing the Southern District of Indiana. So he's the Southern District Attorney here in Indiana. And we have Herb Stapleton, who is handling special investigations for the FBI here in Indianapolis. So he has a very long title. I'm going to ask him if he'll share his title when he speaks as well. And then we also have IMPD Police Chief Christopher Bailey. He's here as well. And what we're hoping to get out of tonight's conversation, the Department of Justice wants to share quite a bit of information in regards to civil rights complaints. We have a lot of issues that are going on where folks feel that their civil rights, they're not being adhered to. As we look across our nation, we see so much going on in that area regarding, well, what exactly are my rights, what are protections. So we're going to dive into that. We've had over the past years, 18 months, many of our communities are aware that we've had a lot of officer-involved incidents. And while we're not going to be able to cover any of those incidents in detail or specifically, what we do want to do is allow Chief Bailey to share why he called for a DOJ review, as well as get an understanding of that process, the DOJ process, where we are in that process, what the different offices or agencies, what their roles are in the process, so that we as a community have an understanding, understand all of the processes. And on tonight, hopefully when we leave, we will have certainly a better understanding of that and where we are at currently with those processes. When you walked in, there is a sign-in sheet. If you already are seated and you were not able to sign in, I'll have somebody come and bring that sign-in sheet around. But we do want to make sure that we capture your information, email information, as we have further dialogue and conversations. We want to make sure that we are sharing that information with you. And certainly if we have any follow-up items, anything we want to follow up that we want the community to be aware of and understand, here are some items that are a direct result based on our conversation that we had Monday, June the 10th. So we will be sharing that information as well. So once again, we're going to have a conversation. All of our panelists, they're excited about sharing as well as hearing from the community. We are going to have, certainly, it will be a moderated event, and we're also streaming on Facebook Live as well. So we want to make sure that we're conducting our meeting in a way in which we can make sure we getting all of the valuable information and sharing all of our concerns in a decent and orderly fashion, okay? All right, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and ask Zach Myers if he can come up. Once again, he represents, he's the Southern District Attorney here for Indiana. Give him a welcome if you would, please.
Thank you very much, Reverend Alexander. Thank you to the CRDC for hosting us here at the Global Village today. As he said, I am Zach Myers. I'm the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Indiana. To set the stage here, I'm going to give everybody, and I apologize, I'll try to do this as concisely as possible, some background on what exactly my office is and what we do and what the Department of Justice sort of writ large does. So I grew up in Indianapolis. I spent about 10 years as a federal prosecutor and assistant U.S. attorney before in here and in Maryland before being appointed by the president and confirmed to be the United States Attorney here. So what the United States Attorney, what my office does is for the southern 2/3 of the state of Indiana, we handle all of, or almost all of the federal criminal prosecutions as well as federal civil enforcement actions or defending civil lawsuits against the federal government. We are a component of the Department of Justice sort of nationally. As those of us who served in the department for a while, feel it's important to point out, we're the only component of your government federally that's sort of named for an ideal, the Department of Justice, not the Department of Prosecutions, the Department of Imprisonment. We're the Department of Justice, and in fact, our core history is tied up in enforcement of civil rights laws. The Department of Justice was created in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War in the 1870s to enforce the original civil rights statutes that were used to prosecute the first iteration of the Ku Klux Klan, all over the country. And we have continued that, as our mission today in the Department of Justice to protect the public, to keep the public safe, uphold the law, and protect civil rights. And in terms of our civil rights work in the U.S. Attorney's Office, the component that just covers this 2/3 of the state of Indiana, we have 5 attorneys, sort of 2 on the criminal side and 3 on the civil side, dedicated primarily to addressing civil rights issues. On the criminal side, they handle investigations and prosecutions of primarily hate crimes or allegations of the deprivation of civil rights under the color of law, frequently referred to as excessive force cases, which I'm going to explain a little bit more about in a minute. But in addition to the U.S. Attorney's offices, which are part of the larger Department of Justice out of D.C., and the Department of Justice, run by the Attorney General, Merrick Garland is our current Attorney General, and each part of the country has a U.S. Attorney's office covering that area, but there's also parts of the Department of Justice based out of D.C. that serve the whole country. One of those is what we call the Civil Rights Division. One of the many things the Civil Rights Division does is work with U.S. Attorney's offices on things like investigation and prosecution of color of law and hate crime, allegations. And we work closely with those attorneys in the Civil Rights Division who are like us, sort of prosecutors that do cases in court. But there's another part of the Department of Justice as well that called the Office of Justice Programs, and one of its components is what they call the COPS office. Now, the entire Office of Justice Programs is a number of different sort of groups of individuals. Some of them are attorneys, but they don't do investigations, they don't do prosecutions out of the COPS office or out of the Office of Justice Programs. What they do is provide resources, technical assistance, referral to sort of outside contracts. They sort of provide things to law enforcement agencies to help them best serve their communities, including dealing with critical incident issues and how to best tailor your practices and policies to that. I know obviously many of you have heard about the recent engagement between that funding component of the Department of Justice and our police department here with IMPD, and I'm going to let the chief later on explain sort of how that came about and sort of what that really entails. On our side of things as prosecutors, the primary tool that we have in addressing allegations of excessive force sort of in any individual case is the statute that prohibits the deprivation of civil rights under color of law. I should say up front, I'm not going to be discussing and aren't able to answer any questions about any specific incidents or allegations of use of force by any individuals at any given time, because it's our policy, Department of Justice. I can't confirm or deny investigations that may or may not be going. Saying that doesn't mean, oh, there is one. It means I really can't say one way or the other, just to protect the process that we engage in. And because almost everything we do federally is a grand jury investigation, is secret. And so it's important for us to protect that process, to respect everybody's rights. But even though we can't talk about individual cases, I do think it's important to explain the legal tools we have and sort of the policies we have to execute on those tools. So the law that we have that we use in cases of alleged excessive force is it criminalizes any individual acting under color of law, people who have government authorization, and particularly federal, state, local law enforcement are all covered by this. And if someone who's acting under government authority willfully subjects another person to deprivation of their rights that are protected by the Constitution, then that's a federal crime. And if we can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt to 12 jurors selected from across the district, then that's something that we may end up prosecuting in federal court. Now, those cases are amongst the most difficult and also amongst the most important that we bring in law enforcement. Our charge from the Attorney General as U.S. attorneys when we first started in this role in this administration was, to make sure that we are connecting with our communities, that we are advancing and building trust in law enforcement. And one of the most important ways to do that, in addition to talking to the community and explaining who we are and what we do, is to make sure that in those cases where someone acting under government authority commits intentionally a crime, it is important for us to take that as seriously as possible. And if we can bring a case successfully there, it's important for us to do so, because those individuals decrease trust and make things worse, not only for the community but for everyone in law enforcement. So these cases are as important as anything we do in the Department of Justice. So for those individuals who are in a government position, if they misuse that power, that legal authority, in a way that results in bodily injury, in death, then they could be, in the case of bodily injury, imprisoned up to 10 years, or in the case of death, imprisoned up to life. And those are very serious penalties, obviously, because it's a very serious crime to do so. Now, one of the most important things about the crime that we investigate and prosecute in these cases is that, when I said willfully, it's the highest legal standard that we have in criminal court. And we have to prove that not only did the defendant engage in a deprivation of someone's civil rights by their right to be free from excessive force, and not only did the person under color of law violate that, but that they did so willfully. That is, they knew what they were doing was illegal, and they did it anyway. So that's what we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to the jury, that not only was it unreasonable in terms of the use of force, and that reasonableness of the use of force under federal law is viewed from the position of objectively, or the objective perspective of a reasonable police officer. So we have to put on evidence in these cases that, of one type or another, to show that a reasonable police officer would have believed that this was excessive force, and the defendant knew that and did it anyway, did that intentionally. So it's a very high burden of proof, but everything in federal court on the criminal side is a high burden of proof, because I think that convicting someone of a crime and sending them potentially to federal prison is an exceedingly serious thing to do, and the government rightly is held to a high burden in order to do that. Now, when we have these matters, because it's so, it can be difficult to prove these cases, but we do grand jury investigations that are secret. Sometimes they're lengthy. We're reviewing records from many sources. We're reviewing reports. We're reviewing, sometimes body camera footage, the contents of electronic devices and accounts, looking into electronic communications, interviewing sometimes numerous witnesses. But also we have to get into the use of force training that may have been provided to the officers who were determining whether or not to charge, or in the course of trying them. We have to investigate sort of the supervision that they received sometimes, or get into the general orders of that agency or agency policies, because we have to prove that knowledge that what they were doing was wrong. So of course we have to prove what they knew in terms of what's right or wrong as a law enforcement officer. But also, and I think really importantly in the context of these cases, we investigate and have charged in a number of these instances where individuals, whether the defendant or others sort of, to benefit the defendant, are essentially working to cover things up, whether it is making false statements in police reports or false statements to investigators, or obstructing justice in some other way, destroying records, destroying documents. Conduct to attempt to thwart an investigation to hold someone accountable for one of these really serious violations. And so frequently you'll see in these prosecutions charges like false statements or obstruction of justice made alongside the charges of the use of excessive force, because frequently those sorts of abuses can't happen unless there's someone else willing to either that individual who did it or someone else, supporting them is willing to help try to cover it up. So when we investigate these cases, we also make sure to investigate, is there obstructive conduct going along, with the abuse of rights. Now, in order to bring these cases, we need to be aware of incidents. So yes, we closely follow, media reports. We're obviously aware when there are, critical incidents like officer-involved shootings. But we also have, relationships with law enforcement agencies all over the country, all over the state that, may be reporting things that they find through, for example, internal investigations. But a critical stream of information to successfully bring these cases is the public. So one of the reasons we do things like this and engage with our partners in the public is to make sure that if you are aware of alleged violations of civil rights, including alleged excessive force incidents, that we might not be, we encourage you to report them too, whether it's to the FBI, whether it's to the U.S. Attorney's Office. We have, and in the back there's information about how to reach our civil rights sort of web page, and we also have our forms out there that you can use to report civil rights issues. And I know frequently you see an email box to send something and you think, well, is this really go anywhere? I send this and nothing happens. I have 2 of the 5 attorneys who receive each and every one of these emails. 2 of our assistant U.S. attorneys who prosecute these cases here in the audience with me today. And I assure you, every one of those emails goes to them and they read them carefully as well as their partners on the civil enforcement side of things. Because, as I said earlier, these are amongst the most serious things we do, in law enforcement. So we want to make sure that we're carefully, reviewing the information that comes to us. Not everything is going to, be something that for one reason or another results in the opening of a federal investigation, or even if there is an investigation that results in the filing of charges. And of course, we speak through our work in court, and so unless something gets to the charging level, you're unlikely to hear about whether or not we're even involved. But I still encourage you to understand how important these matters are to us and to bring things to our attention, even if we ultimately end up not being able to, or it ends up being not something that's appropriate for us to charge. We don't know that until we look. So with all that, and I'm sure there are going to be additional questions, and I'm happy to hear from folks, but first I want to give you a chance to hear from Herb Stapleton, who's the special agent in charge for the FBI's Indiana office, who's going to talk about sort of how the FBI intersects with these investigations, and their process with that. And then after that, we'll have Chief Bailey talk about this recent engagement that, he has entered into and IMPD has entered into with the funding part of the Department of Justice. So, Special Agent in charge.
Am I on? Oh, yes, I am. I was a little worried about that to start with. Thank you very much, U.S. Attorney Myers. And I just want to start off by saying, it's really a privilege for me to have the opportunity to be here. I really enjoy having an opportunity to go out and try to talk about the important work that the FBI does, and to echo, what U.S. Attorney Myers just said. There's really no more important work in our responsibility than the work of trying to identify where there has been a civil rights violation and investigate that, and when appropriate, bring it to the U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecution. And so what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about tonight is really just our process for how do we get these types of allegations, and then what do we do with them once we take in these types of allegations. And so I'll really kind of focus on that. So first and foremost, I think I want to say that the FBI's mission is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. And as you just heard U.S. Attorney Myers describe, there's really no part of our work where those two things coalesce more closely than in the civil rights violations. We're doing both of those things in one, right? We're upholding the Constitution. These are typically constitutional rights that we are trying to protect, and identifying instances in which they may have been violated, and investigating those thoroughly. And of course, by enforcing those particular laws, we are protecting the American people. We're protecting the people in our communities from abuses of authority that, sadly can often result in, death or serious bodily injury, as U.S. Attorney Myers described. And so the stakes in these particular investigations are extremely high. And so I think that's really the first thing I want you to know, is that we recognize how high the stakes are in when these types of allegations are made. They're extremely serious, and we take them as such. And so we apply a lot of scrutiny to these types of allegations. And just as U.S. Attorney Myers mentioned that part of his team was here, part of my team is here as well. Our supervisor, who is responsible for the Civil Rights and Public Corruption Squad here in Indianapolis, is here with us tonight. And I assure you that our team looks at each and every one of these allegations and tries to sort of identify whether an investigation is appropriate under the circumstances that are presented to us. And so I'd like to get into really how that happens a little bit, because I think that's an important thing, an important sort of jumping off point for what we do. So when it comes to civil rights investigations, use of force investigations, color of law investigations, those types of things, we really primarily get those cases from two sources, and we can really get them from anywhere. We get all kinds of reports from different sources, but really two kind of ways that those types of allegations typically come to us. One of them, you may not be surprised to hear, is that we get those allegations from members of the community like yourselves, who either know about a particular incident or may have been a witness to a particular incident, and they send an email or file a complaint online at FBI.gov, or they call the FBI office, or they call the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the U.S. Attorney's Office refers it over to us. Through some kind of mechanism, we get that complaint from the public. And so we read each and every one of those and conduct an evaluation of whether further investigation is going to be appropriate. And I'll get into a little bit what we're looking for in that particular area in just a second. The second way that the second primary way that we get these types of allegations, and this one you may or may not be a little bit more surprised to hear, is that we get them from the command staff or the members of the police department in which the incident has allegedly occurred. And so, we work proactively to try to identify where there may have been an abuse of authority, and one of our partners in that effort is local police departments or state police departments. And so from time to time we will get a referral from a local police department or from state police or elsewhere, including the IMPD, that says, essentially there's been an incident. We have taken a look at it, and we would also like for the FBI to take a look at it to determine whether any criminal activity has occurred. And so we will work, we'll take that and review that particular incident as well, and really apply it doesn't matter where the complaint comes from. We apply the same standards to determine whether additional investigation is appropriate and whether we're going to start working toward a potential prosecution. So those are the two primary ways. I think it's just really important to know how we get those in the first place, and that we treat them all the same. We give them all the same initial review. Once those particular instances come in and we have an opportunity to review them, what we're really looking for is, based on the facts that we have, and that could be a number of things. It could be just a witness account. It could be body camera footage. It could be accounts of, other people who were present at the time of an incident. Once we sort of have all the preliminary facts, we're going to review that and determine whether whether we can sort of reasonably believe that those facts may meet the legal standards that U.S. Attorney Myers just described. So when he talked about the willfulness, whether or not someone was deprived of those rights that he described, we're looking for all those things and whether they might potentially, whether we might be able to potentially meet the elements of the crime. We don't have to have a case that's ready to go to a jury on day one. That's why we do the investigation. We gather more evidence that either tends to prove that there has been a crime committed, or maybe evidence that tends to prove that crime was not committed. That also happens at times. We get into an investigation and we determine that once we have gathered all the facts and all the evidence that in fact no crime has been committed, or that we don't have the necessary evidence to prove that a crime has been committed, in which case the investigation would come to an end at that point. And so I think another important thing to realize is that as we sort of conduct this preliminary evaluation of our evidence, we in Indiana want to partner with our colleagues at the prosecutor's office as early in the process as we can. And so they're really a part of that from early on in the investigation. And the reason for that is, at the end of the day, if there's going to be a prosecution of a crime that's been committed, they're going to be an integral part of that. The FBI doesn't prosecute cases, we just investigate them. And so it's really important for us to have sort of the legal, we have very experienced investigators conducting these cases, and so they know very well the legal standards, but they will not be the people who will present the case to a jury at the end of the day. There'll be people who testify at a trial if there is one, and so we want to make sure that we have sort of the legal guidance and sort of a team approach to the prosecution of these really important cases. As U.S. Attorney Myers said, these are really difficult cases, and so as a result, it's even more important to have all members of the investigative prosecutorial team on board really from day one and collaborating on what the best path forward is. So that will include, for the FBI here in Indiana, both attorneys from U.S. Attorney Myers' office, if it's in the Southern District. It will also include conversations with those civil rights division attorneys from headquarters. And so that's, once we sort of start to evaluate the case in front of us, those are kind of the key members of the team that we're going to be consulting with. And then we have a decision to make. And that decision is essentially, are we going to open a federal investigation, or are we not going to open a federal investigation? And as you're probably aware, we don't make an announcement when we open an investigation, typically. We don't make an announcement when we decide not to open an investigation, typically. And I know that can serve as a source of some frustration to people within the community, but that is not because we are trying to sort of hide any sort of parts of our process. Our process is very transparent and open. I'll tell you anything you want to know about our process. But it is important that we protect the rights of people that we are investigating, that we protect the rights of potential victims, that we protect the rights of witnesses along the way. And so that's why department policy really prohibits us from talking about those decisions to open or not open an investigation. Once we open a federal investigation, this is not always the case, but it can sometimes take a while to kind of get through the investigative process, and that's primarily because we, in my opinion, do an extraordinarily thorough job in all our investigations, and especially in ones that we know may be hard cases to successfully prosecute. We don't intend to go into an investigation, sort of halfway. We want to go into it, in a way that is, fully invested in trying to see that justice is done. And the best way that we can do that is doing our jobs the right way. And so sometimes to do your job the right way in these very sort of labor-intensive investigations, it can take time. And so that is why it may sometimes seem like it takes a long time to get from sort of the incident to a federal prosecution. That's really because we're trying to make sure that everything is done the right way in compliance with the law and our requirements under the Constitution. And so we review all the evidence that U.S. Attorney Myers talked about, and I won't rehash all that. Whether it's body camera footage, witness testimony, devices, cell phones, computers, whatever it may be, whatever the relevant evidence is, and whatever we have the authority to take or to review, with the approval of a judge, of a federal judge, through a warrant or otherwise. And then, there's an ongoing consultation, of course, with the prosecutors, and then once we sort of reach the point where we don't think there's any more relevant evidence to gather, then there's going to be a prosecutorial decision made. And U.S. Attorney Myers talked about that decision. But at that point, we're working with them to decide whether or not there's a case that can be proven in court, whether we can prove those elements based on the evidence that we've gathered. So let me just kind of wrap up by saying, when it comes to our investigations, I think one of the really important things to remember is we take this process really, really seriously. And once we determine that there is justification, or predication is the term that we use a lot for this type of investigation, we're not going to stop the investigation until we've gathered all the relevant evidence. We'll go, as far as we need to go to get the evidence that we believe is relevant to the decision of whether or not any person is guilty of a federal crime. It's a very serious thing, whether that person be a law enforcement officer or a member of the community. So we're going to gather all the evidence, not just one side of the evidence, but all sort of perspectives of it, so that the U.S. Attorney's Office and us can make the most informed decision that we possibly can. And then just one more thing before I turn it over to Chief Bailey, which I think is a fairly good segue into what he's going to talk about. I think there is a misconception sometimes when we talk about color of law violations in particular, and civil rights violations. And that is, I talk to a lot of people in the community who sort of see the FBI as kind of like the oversight body for local law enforcement all across the country. That our job is sort of to review all the actions of a local law enforcement agency and make sure that they're done, in the right way, if that makes sense. And that's really not within our authority. Our authority is to investigate allegations of federal crimes, and some of those happen to fall into the category of potential crimes committed by police officers under their official authority. So there is a sort of a distinction that can be a hard one to make between what I'll call kind of like misconduct and what is federal criminal activity. And so there are things that happen within law enforcement agencies, including the FBI or any large organization, that might be against regulations or procedures. And that could even happen during a use of force type of incident. But the FBI does not have the authority to investigate whether or not someone violated their department's regulations or policies. That's not within our authority. And sometimes those things can overlap. It can be both an instance of misconduct and federal criminal activity, but sometimes they don't. There certainly are things that might not comply with a particular department's regulations or procedures, but don't rise to the level of federal criminal activity because of the things that U.S. Attorney Myers talked about with willfulness and the deprivation of that person's rights. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you hear reports or hear about things that have happened and you wonder why a federal investigation was not opened, or maybe there just doesn't appear to be a federal investigation. That could be one reason that happened. There could be disciplinary action that's appropriate, but it might not be a federal criminal act. And so I would ask you to kind of keep that misconception in mind and try to make that distinction in your minds as you sort of view and see these things as members of the community. So I'll close out by just saying thank you for allowing me an opportunity to do this, and I really look forward to your questions. I'll turn it over to Chief Bailey.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see so many friendly faces here this evening. It's probably not going to stay up there, is it? Nope. All right, there we go. So I'm going to briefly talk about why we asked for an outside review and how we got to the COPS office, and specifically the National Policing Institute, who's the actual organization doing the review. So in 2023, we saw an uptick in our officer-involved shootings. We average about 10 a year since 2015. Last year we saw 18, and so that was a significant number, higher than we had seen, and especially compressed from about August of 2023 on. So I think we had 4 maybe during budget time, and then after about August, then we saw the most occur in that short period of time. and then into this year. So we wanted to make sure that we had someone outside of our agency look at our policies, training, procedures, and data to see if there were things that we could do differently, things that are within our control to reduce the number of these particular incidents. So we had proposals. I sought proposals from several organizations, nonprofit organizations, think tanks, others, and I ran across, which is back there in the back of the room. This document talks about the Collaborative Reform Initiative program through the COPS office, and one of the particular programs on there is Critical Response, where they take a look at critical incident after action reviews. And so I submitted basically a document online explaining what our positions, what we were going through, what we were looking for, what is it that we wanted, and waited to see if DOJ would accept our proposal or would partner with us. They did. In doing so, we saved the taxpayers of Marion County at least $225,000 because the least expensive review was about that much. They ranged from $225,000 all the way up to almost $700,000 to do these reviews. So with partnering with the DOJ, specifically the COPS office, we saved taxpayers money, and we're going to get exactly what we're looking for within this review. So we spoke with Mayor Hogsett at his direction. We entered into a partnership with the COPS office and DOJ and National Policing Institute. So over the next few months, they're going to review our data, our records, policies, practices. Their team will engage with our officers, other stakeholders, and community members by conducting individual and focus group interviews. And to be clear, this study is about not about the individual actions of the officers involved in any of these incidents or the incidents themselves. We have processes in place that look at those particular issues. Some of it you heard from our federal partners. I will tell you that there's not a piece of information that I would never not turn over to the FBI if they ask for it, or the Department of Justice. We voluntarily provide that information on all of our critical incidents and have for a period of time for them to look at. And if there's pieces of information that they don't get, they will certainly get it for them to do their jobs and review these incidents as well. It is also important to note that this was a review that we asked for. This was a proactive step on our part, to look at these incidents to see how we can be better if there are things within our control. And this is not a DOJ civil rights patterns and practice investigation. We are and will continue to remain committed to transparency, accountability, and the safety of every one of our neighbors and our police officers. Our policies, procedures, and training are the foundation of our operations, and part of this study will look at those to make sure they incorporate national best practices in serving our community. And so now I'll go through quickly about this specific organization. National Policing Organization is the oldest of its type in the country, and they are who the COPS office contracts with, the DOJ contracts with as a vendor to do these reviews, not just here, but all across the country. They use subject matter experts in fields from education to law enforcement to the law, use of force, whatever, the wide range of individuals that they utilize to do these and conduct these investigations. So right now we're in the material and collection review process of this project. They asked for all of our policies. They asked for data. They asked for every bit of public information that's available, so our critical incident videos, public statements, all those things, and we've provided all that documentation to them. This month, their researchers will be coming in to also work with our data expert to provide all the other data we want going back as far as they want. We will make it available to them, internal affairs documentation, every bit of information related to the 2023 officer-involved shootings will be made available to them for them to review. They will come back in a couple months. That is when they will conduct more in-depth interviews with people within the agency, command staff, and stakeholders outside of the department, including our community members. And that's probably sometime in August, but I'm not going to lock them in because we work on their schedule. Once they have all their information, they will review all that information. They will compile a report and provide that report to us and the community with a list of things that they found, a list of recommendations that they suggest we change. We don't have, while we'll get an opportunity to see the draft as a report, we can't change any of that, neither can MPI. Final approval of the report comes from the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and they have the final say in the report, and we've made that commitment. The mayor and I both have made the commitment the report will be public. So just a few of the data that they've requested: policies and procedures, internal SOPs, operations plans, policies related to officer-involved shooting incidents, use of force policies, all internal debriefs and after-action reports, our curriculum, lesson plans, and training records on use of force, how we and when we notify and respond to these issues, tactical training, other things, documentations, body-worn camera, in-car video, external video, bystander footage, 911 calls, computer-aided dispatch information, any investigative reports, and public messaging and communications. So they get everything that they ask for. Some of the focus of the report is going to be on leadership response and involvement, policy and procedure, equipment and training, incidents and the environment, supervision and investigative responses, internal communication, situational awareness and intelligence, external communications, public relations, and community stakeholder feedback and transparency. Those are the focuses. That's where they're going to be focused on in this report. So one of the things that I think that I want to address also tonight is that over the last 4 years, 4.5 years now, this department has been engaged with our community to make some significant changes in the way we do business and the way that we were reviewed, accountable, and transparent. There is not another agency in the country, especially a large agency, that has more civilian oversight than IMPD. Civilian Merit Board hires, fires, promotes, and supervises discipline in this agency. Police Citizens Complaint Board, if you have a complaint, they moderate that. Civilian Majority Use of Force Review Board, all uses of deadly force is reviewed by a Use of Force Review Board with more civilians on it than sworn officers. The General Orders Board, the people that write our policies, Civilian Majority Use of Force, our General Orders Board, all of our policies go through them, and they approve those with input from the community. We have built a body-worn camera system since 2019, late 2019. We are in the process of adding in-car cameras. We are probably one of the only agencies in the state of Indiana that and the only one in Marion County that I know of, that at every single time produces the video, whether it's in a critical incident video. You don't see that from other agencies in this county, and most in the state don't. It is not something that our prosecutor friends want us to do, but we do it because we know that we have a different level of accountability to the community than some others, and so we take that additional step and we take that chance. We meet with a group of community members 48 hours after each and every critical incident and go through what happened, what we know at the time, answer questions with that individual group. We have built our critical incident videos with our community support and backing and with their feedback. Before you see these videos on TV or on social media, they see them first and they provide feedback about what's in them, what they don't understand, what information can be more clear, what information slants it one way or the other, and we've utilized that information to really make have a robust process. Nobody in the country that I know of does that like we do, and I'm proud of that. And we're looking at ways to increase that transparency, especially with body-worn camera video. And so we're hoping that at the end of this process, there'll be some new recommendations on that. If not, we have some ideas that we'll run by the community to see if they like that in our transparency. We also operate under the law. Indiana has one of the most liberal self-defense laws in the country. That's what determines whether or not someone breaks the law is the law. And so I suggest you read that law on self-defense, and specific to use of force and deadly force by law enforcement in the state of Indiana is dictated in law. That is the law. Prior to July 1st of this year, agencies in the state of Indiana could set their own policy on use of force. And so the law is the basement. So Graham versus Connor, Tennessee versus Garner, those cases, state law, federal law, that's the basement for use of force. We cannot make it any less strict than what the law says, but we can put added layers on it to make it more strict. That is our ability. We can say you can't use chokeholds. We can say you can't do A, B, C, and D, as long as we don't go below what the state and federal thresholds are for use of force. We created a policy with the community over the last 4 years that I think is one that is a national best policy. Effective July 1st, 2024, the IMPD no longer has purview over its own use of force policy. We can't change it. We can't manipulate it in any way. It is dictated by the Indiana Law Enforcement Training Board under state law. It's online, and I've shared it with many in here. This is the new state policy for use of force. It's very closely mimics Indiana state law. And so this is what will dictate every use of force, deadly force in the state of Indiana, regardless of whether you work for a sheriff's office or a major metropolitan police department like the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. It can only be changed by a 3/4 majority vote by the members of the Indiana Law Enforcement Training Board, of which I'm a member, and before me, Chief Taylor was a member. We are one vote out of about 17 people on that board. It cannot be changed. They also dictated what and how we train to this policy. All that information is on their website, and effective July 1st, 2024, this will be the policy of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. I think that, Pastor, you wanted me to bring that up, and so I did tonight. Oh, I think that about sums it up. This document does a really good job of talking about the fact sheet, COPS fact sheet, of what resources are available to local law enforcement from the COPS office. We've utilized many of these over the years to help us write policies. We use Crytek, I believe, that helped us look at how we conduct homicide investigations. I think I saw Chief Adams in the room today. Crytek was one of the partners in that initiative to look at how we investigate homicides. So the DOJ and the COPS office are very good to local law enforcement. They help bring together subject matter experts that help guide our actions, policies, training, and other things to make sure that there's some national best practices in what we do. And with that, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I know that was a lot of information, but you all know how to get a hold of me. I'm happy to have any one-on-one conversations and with anybody here and answer any questions tonight. Thank you.
So we're getting ready for our Q&A portion. We spent the first 50 minutes or so. Hopefully you have been able to digest a lot that has been shared on, at least thus far. Hopefully you understand, okay, here are maybe some of the lines for which what Chief Bailey was just speaking to, what the lines are as far as what the Southern District Attorney's Office, what they're responsible for, or what they're doing compared to our national DOJ. And then also, as he spoke to that deadly force policy for Indiana, there are copies that we printed. I'm not sure if we'll have enough copies, but we do have copies in the back if you'd like to take a paper copy back with you, and then you can also get those online, as he mentioned there. And now we're going to ask our U.S. Attorney if he can go ahead and guide us through our Q&A session. And we've got a couple of runners. I'm not sure. Okay, there's one, and there's the other there in the back. So if you've got a question, I'm going to ask you, raise your hand and let us know. And we're going to start with the young lady here in the purple.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for being here today. I mean, this is really nice. I was listening to the gentleman here when he discussed about the federal elements. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to know, what are the federal elements, and how many has to be met before you can move forward within that investigation process?
Excellent.
Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, I just happen to have them in front of me.
Okay.
thankfully, one of my prosecutors helped hand this to me ahead of time because, we want to make sure before the jury, the jury instructions, if those of you who've been to a criminal trial seen it on TV, after you go through the trial, you produce the evidence, you hear the closing arguments, then the jury is instructed that, in order to find the defendant guilty as charged, they must find unanimously, beyond a reasonable doubt, each and every one of. So whenever there's elements of the offense, we have to prove all of them. And so the elements that we'd have to prove, for this statute, and I guess for the lawyers in the room, it's Title 18, United States Code, Section 242. It's the deprivation of rights under color of law. And it criminalizes the action of whoever under color of law, so that's that acting under governmental authority, whether it is law enforcement or some other government authority, federal, state, local law enforcement, willfully, sort of that state of mind that not only did you do the thing that was prohibited, the depriving someone of rights, but you did it knowing it was illegal, knowing it was the violation, and you chose to do it anyway. And so we have to prove that state of mind in addition to the actions. And then that the thing that was done was a deprivation of the rights, deprivation of some right secured by the U.S. Constitution. Almost always in these cases, we're talking about the right to be free from excessive, well, in the case of people who are in custody, like in a jail or prison, sometimes it might be the right to be free from unconstitutionally excessive punishment. But usually what we're talking about is under the Fourth Amendment, the right to be free from unreasonable sort of search and seizure, the excessive use of physical force resulting in bodily injury, or death. And the right that's deprived, sort of built into what I just said, I conflated two elements, which you shouldn't do in trial. But, it's both that the right was deprived and that right is secured by the Constitution or federal law. And importantly, sort of as part of those elements, there's an additional element to get to a felony offense, and it's that bodily injury or death is what makes it a felony in these excessive force cases. And for each of those, the jury will be given an instruction explaining kind of in detail what all of those elements mean. But, I covered that. But when we talk about the excessive force, what sort of force violates the Fourth Amendment, that's where we get into the instruction that viewed objectively from the perspective of a reasonable police officer, which is why you hear us talk about, well, what is the training they received? What are the policies of the use of force policies of the particular police agency? Because that's sort of the evidence that we're using to try to get into their head to prove for that, prototypical, objectively reasonable police officer, what is it that they would believe is unreasonable, excessive force, and what's not? Because we have to prove that the force not only was excessive, but it was intentionally excessive in violation of the Constitution. Does that make sense? Excellent. You're exactly right. Now,
that's difficult to prove. I understand what you're saying, but it's very difficult to prove someone's intent.
It absolutely is. It's difficult to prove knowing intent, which is the standard for most prosecutions. So willfulness, that even higher standard, you're exactly right. That is a very hard thing to prove. Not only do we have to prove it, that higher level of, the mens rea, the Latin, the knowledge of the bad thing, but we have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt to 12 randomly selected citizens after they've been screened by the judge and screened by and subject to sort of, strikes by the government and the defendant. But also in these color of law cases, almost always the defendant is someone who, they're a sworn officer. They have sworn to uphold the law. They've sworn to protect their communities. And, many people, because the vast majority of officers who are doing the right thing have earned community trust, that for, a lot of jurors, it can be hard to look at the actions of an officer and say not only was that wrong or bad policing or a bad idea or a violation of the rules, but that was a crime and they knew it was a crime. That's an exceedingly high burden to prove. You're exactly right. But it should be hard to send someone to federal prison. And when we put someone, when we give someone a badge and a gun and put them on the street in a situation where, as we've seen far too often, in the last several years in Indiana, law enforcement officers being killed on the job trying to serve and protect that public, that, you know, they are protected by when they are acting reasonably and when they are acting not with an intent to commit a crime. You know, the law protects them from criminal prosecution because federal prison cannot be the solution to every problem in any area of crime. But particularly, we want to reserve federal prison as a remedy for those cases that are so egregious that 12 people can agree beyond a reasonable doubt that this person not only violated the Constitution, but did it intentionally. Other questions? Sir. I don't know if someone wants to help him with a microphone.
I have it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see the hand up back there. Elder, please.
Thank you. How are you today?
Pleasure. Great to see you. How are you doing?
Great to be seen. I'm concerned not so much about what the law is, but how it's applied. Chief Bailey spoke about the reason for this study is because of the last 6 months of 2023, there was an uptick of police action shootings, which was 18, which is the number he used. But he didn't say that of those 18 people shot, 17 were men of African descent, black men. He said that he's looking at the uptick in numbers from a normal of 10 that went up to 18, almost double. But I cannot ignore the race factor. When you look at the killings of this year, or the shootings, 6 of the people shot, 4 of them are men of African descent. I am concerned as a man of African descent that the numbers are saying that I'm a target. And I think now, to my understanding, that is a federal violation. And so, and I know you can't say whether you're investigating, and I know this is something that has been requested by Chief Bailey. But I cannot ignore that this same situation was happening in Mississippi, and they found a cabal of police officers that were coordinated to go out there and kill black people. I'm concerned with the numbers here in this city that the same damn thing ain't happening. So I would ask the federal government, and you don't have to tell us, but I would ask, out of the safety of my people, specifically men of African descent, that the federal government does a investigation, whatever you want to call it, to make sure that among the police department here in this city, that there's not a goon squad like was found in Mississippi. Now, you don't have to tell me, but I sure would appreciate if y'all would investigate that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. He had a question. Yeah. No, but I think yours might be on.
Okay. I think it was you, Chief Bailey, that talked about how the process works and that you're going to get our DOJ is going to get an outside consultant to actually do the investigation. What do you or DOJ know about that outside consultant? The reason I ask that is that the consultant has people, human beings working for them, and they can have preconceived notions of what should or should not be. What's their background? Because where DOJ is looked at as being an outside third party looking into this. But if DOJ is contracting it out, what assurance do we have that this contractor is actually going to be a truly outside, uninfluenced third party in this process?
One, this is a vendor selected by the Department of Justice of the United States government, not by IMPD. They have a history of conducting research and investigations for departments all across the city, and you could go to the National Policing Institute website and review all the reviews that they've done, regardless of maybe with the exception of a criminal case where attorneys are involved from the DOJ. The federal government's always going to use outside consultants. Whether if there was a consent decree of patterns and practice, there's going to be a group of people that they're going to pull together from some firm and pay millions of dollars to monitor the city, to track progress, to push policies and funding for different things. So that's just what they do. And whether it's this critical incident review or one of the other grants or processes available by the DOJ, they select the vendor that's appropriate. And the DOJ has this final say on the report, not us or MPI. And they have someone attached to the group too. So you have SMEs, but you also have a subject matter expert, they also have a person that oversees all of that from the DOJ and the COPS office.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to ask we understand your role in this is important. So I've been wondering, and you're fairly new. You were appointed about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, a little more than that.
Yeah. And you succeeded the fellow, and I forget his name, who was in charge of the Indianapolis office during the Larry Nassar scandal. And when you came, when you were appointed and put out a press release and made some appearances and stuff, I didn't hear any talk about reform of the Indianapolis office. If you've ever read Dick Cady's book, and you should, back in the late 20th century at least, the Indianapolis FBI office had been known as the worst in the country. And in Senate Justice Committee hearings, when your boss appeared before the committee a couple of 2-3 years ago, one of the senators asked the director if there was something about the culture of the Indianapolis FBI office that led to those failures. And then he had to run, so it wasn't answered. But my question is, have you looked at that? Have you made a commitment to improve what was, decades ago, known as the worst FBI office in the country, and deal with that culture that led to the Nassar scandal that could lead to, and I'm here to tell you, but could lead to other errors, serious errors?
So yeah, let me just, the way I'll answer your question is, I can't really speak to what happened decades ago in the Indianapolis field office, but I have a lot of confidence in the people that we have in the office today, a whole lot of confidence in them. And then you mentioned the Nassar investigation, USA Gymnastics investigation. I think I would just refer you to, our director has talked at length about this, about what happened there, and about the reforms that the FBI put in place. And the Indianapolis field office, along with the other 55 field offices in the country, have put those reforms in place, as required by the Office of Inspector General report.
More questions?
This one is for Chief Bailey. As you gave a list of what should take place, you retracted the idea of police action. Could you explain to the community why you have rejected the investigation of police action?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
The question is that you're not going to be putting any investigation on police action shootings.
No, that's not true. I said that the investigators would have access to all the investigative files and the internal affairs files for all the 2023 officer-involved shootings. They'll have access to all the information. But this isn't about the individual actions of the officers or the
That's what I'm
incident.
talking about, the individual actions.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
not what this review is about. Those reviews are being done by Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department Critical Incident Response Team, which is the criminal investigation part of these investigations, the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. Administratively, it'll be reviewed by Internal Affairs, followed up by the Use of Force Review Board, Civilian Majority Use of Force Review Board. Final disciplinary action will be recommended to me, and if I've recommended a certain amount of discipline, it can be reviewed by the Civilian Merit Board.
So the
those
handling
reviews
of the
continue.
officer, the handling of the officer is right here locally.
Yes.
Thank you.
That information is also shared with every one of the is shared with the FBI. All the case files, everything's duplicated, all the evidence for them to review in every single incident.
Thank you. I think the gentleman here has another question if nobody else has one.
Yeah, point up front here. If you do have a question, let our runners know. Just raise your hand, and then runners, if you can let us know up front, so we can get that.
Go for
With this question, what I wanted to ask, and I know that you have a limited amount of time to do these investigations, but how far back are you going to look at these type of practices? Indianapolis, like every city, has a history of these kind of things, some of them worse than others. But the community can develop a sense of practices over time that if we don't think about that and address that, that becomes an underlying problem. So I'm talking the long range, and not individuals, but the long range of practices of the number of officers of civilians, period.
Yeah, so IMPD interacts about 800,000 times with people every single year, multitudes of different ways, 800,000 times. We had 18 officer-involved shootings last year. 800,000 times 18. 18's too many. We're going to look at 2023 in this study, but since 2020, we have changed our use of force policy. We have changed our training curriculum. We have added integrated communications and tactics training, which is a de-escalation training. We have added a mental health first aid, critical incident response, fair and impartial policing. The list goes on and on, the things that we've looked at in the last 3 years. This is just another continuation of us looking internally at what we can control, what we can control. We can't control the actions of other people. Sometimes officer actions are in response to other people's actions, which we cannot control. But what is it that is within our control that we can try to mitigate these issues? Because, I don't want any community member to lose their life at the hands of an officer or be seriously injured. The officers don't want it. They're human beings as well. They carry the weight of this. We I've probably pensioned off 10 officers in the last 4 years that have been involved in these type of incidents, whether they were directly involved or a tertiary involvement, whether they were shot at or shot, or friends with someone who was shot or killed in the line of duty. So this is real to them too. And so part of this is also to make sure that our officers don't have to go through that. Their families don't have to go through that. The community is always the top. But secondary to that is I don't want them to have to go through the scrutiny and the issues related to these issues, both physically and mentally, for not only themselves and their families, that last as long as they're alive. And so that's also what I want to prevent. It's not just, number one's community, always will be community protection. But secondary to that is officer health, safety, wellness, and well-being.
Go right ahead.
I have another question for Chief Bailey. So you mentioned a couple of these oversight boards. You mentioned Civilian Merit Board, and you mentioned the Complaint Board. So what is the criteria for individuals like myself and others, everyday city Hoosiers, to be a part of that board? Is it an application process? Are they selectively selected? How does that process work?
Yes, the appointments of the civilian members are done by one of two entities: the mayor of the city of Indianapolis and the city county counselors. So you can speak to your counselors or the mayor of your involvement. If I see Ms. Donna gave you the microphone, you're more than welcome to join our civilian calls, and Ms. Donna can connect you with Toby, and you can be a part of those if you want. We're looking to add new people to those and new views and new outlooks to those. And it's not just, in fact, many of the people in those calls are not what I would say cheerleaders for law enforcement. So we want people involved. But the boards specifically are appointees by your elected officials.
Thank you.
I have a question. Chief Bailey, you said from 2010 through 2022, there were 15 shootings. July 1st of 2022, the Indiana law changed. When that law change happened, I think as a community, what we need to consider is that you have people running around with guns who have no business having guns. Not only are they being shot, they are shooting at our police officers. I'm concerned about the community, but in addition to that, I am concerned about our police officers. To me, it's not a one-way situation. It's a two-way situation. Our police officers are being shot at probably more than they have for many years. So I think that we need to consider that the law changed, and that law needs to be put back in place where we don't have so many people who aren't supposed to have guns.
I appreciate you bringing that up. Last year, we had almost 450 officers assaulted, and I shared those numbers also with Toby, and I don't know if he distributed them to the group widely or not, but and almost probably at least half of the number of officer-involved shootings, we had at least that number of officers that were shot at and shot in 2023. So it is a significant problem. There are a lot of guns in the community. Downtown Indianapolis this weekend, there was probably 400 unsupervised youth. Most of them were carrying weapons. We were able to mitigate those issues and make several arrests with weapons. The spinning groups, the street takeovers this weekend, I know Northwest is here. They did a great job. Made several arrests on that, confiscated one gun out of the cars that we had to chase with a machine gun conversion device that turns a Glock handgun to a fully automatic machine handgun with one pull of the trigger. Every round in that gun, and if you have an extended magazine or a drum magazine, you can empty every round in there in less than 3 seconds. That's dangerous for everyone, community members and otherwise. Whether they're shooting at the police or shooting at each other in a small neighborhood, those bullets are not controllable once they come out of the gun, and that puts everybody in danger. So, like I said, we're looking at ways we can reform and change our practices that make our work safer for the community and our officers. That's what we can focus on. We can't always focus on or control what people outside in the community do. That's for the community to look in the mirror and see what they can do differently and better.
Chief, before we get to our next question, you mentioned, you gave an invitation actually for the critical incident phone calls. Do you have a number that would be a maximum number, or you're open to the community at large?
Whatever Zoom can hold. I think that's the platform that Toby uses is Zoom. So however that works, however many, and that's not under my control. That's the CDRC's and the CRT. Those we make recommendations and obviously invite people to that, but a lot of those individuals are engaged community members from all over the county.
Thank you.
Hi, my questions are, one, did you say that the DOJ would be providing also recommendations within this investigative report? Would that be in there for whatever you might find within the investigation? Also, will there be data provided that shows any kind of disproportionality within demographics or within communities in Indianapolis or surrounding areas that can be compared and contrast as to whether or not this use of force, is placed more in one area versus another, impacting certain demographics versus another? And then
Can I answer those one at a time because my brain can't handle all of it and I'll forget to answer your questions.
Okay.
So the first question was, I don't know what information they are going to put in the report, but they're provided with that information. Demographic information, both of the officer and the individual, the address where it occurred. That information is available to you right now if you go to IndyGov's.
Yeah, I think I'm asking the DOJ maybe if their report is going to have that data.
They're not involved in that report. This part of the DOJ is not involved in that report.
Oh, I thought they were doing a DOJ investigative report.
No, were you at the beginning of the meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, the U.S. Attorney's Office here investigates criminal and civil rights cases. What we're using is the COPS office, which is another arm or separate office of the DOJ, to conduct this report, this review.
Okay. And so your answer was, again, that?
I don't know what they're going to put in the report, but they've been provided that information. And you have access to that information right now on our website that shows demographics, address, and all that on the IMPD website.
Okay. Well, this was sort of related to the DOJ also, but maybe it's applicable around equity metrics. I know that the federal government has required its various agencies to have equity included in its agencies all throughout. Is that something that the current City of Indianapolis administration is employing, like equity within all of its departments as well as the IMPD? And if not, is that something that could be implemented going forward, as perhaps proactively in the future?
The IMPD had its own separate Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion before the City of Indianapolis did. The City of Indianapolis also has one under Director Ben Tapper. Captain John Walton runs ours. So both exist within the city enterprise right now.
And then I'll step back. I'm not really as, obviously concerned about diversity, obviously concerned about inclusion, but equity metrics that kind of can measure how things are performing, if there's, we've had several use of force in this area, and we have a metric around that, embedding it within everything that you do, and having like an actual scoring system internally that you're meeting your own equity metrics of policing, I guess.
Yeah, I don't, no, not at this point, but it's something certainly that I can talk to John about.
can't see our runners. Do we have a question? Any questions coming from the audience? Okay. Well, let me ask this question while I guess we're waiting on that to see if anyone has any questions. All right, well, just come on up and we'll get you. But have him come up. Arnetta, have him come up because the mics may not reach. So we're having a little issues. That's why we're getting some feedback here. So if you can, just get a little closer. Thank you.
I got one more question.
All right, just a moment. So, Chief, you kind of mentioned at least the process in August. You were looking for some more interviews and other items that were going to transpire as part of that review. I'm not sure that I heard an overall timetable for a conclusion. Do you have any idea of what that is, or do they give you one up front?
They've given us some loose timelines, but not holding themselves to any particular timeline. By the end of the year is what I'm told, but if they run any kind of roadblocks on their end, they won't run any roadblocks on our end. They're going to get everything they want. But if they run any roadblocks on their end, or the DOJ takes time to review the report, that could delay it. But by the end of the year is what we hope to have it done.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Albert.
Is it possible that you could share the contact of the DOJ so that people know who, if it's not Zach Myers, then who is it that you're partnered with the DOJ, so the public knows? Could you share that information?
It's the COPS office out of Washington, D.C.
Could you share their contact information?
I don't have it with me.
Well, hold on. It may be, we do have handouts, and there are handouts that I believe has that information on there.
That's correct. It's on the back
Is that right?
of the handout.
Outstanding,
Yep.
outstanding. And secondly, this organization that you're a member of that is determining the use of force for police agencies across the state, was that created by legislation?
Yes, the Law Enforcement Training Board has been around for as long as I can remember, but there was legislation probably 2 years ago that changed the law that gave them purview over statewide use of force training and policy, and also vehicle pursuit policy. So that's written into Indiana statute.
So no longer do elected officials determine how police will police in Indiana. The police determine it.
The Law Enforcement Training Board dictates minimum use of force, or excuse me, minimum standards and policy related to vehicle pursuits, and controls a statewide policy for use of force, use of deadly force for every single law enforcement agency in the state of Indiana.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, one
So-
policy for every.
Yeah,
every,
that's what I'm
yep,
saying.
yep.
No, that no longer does the people elected by the citizens of Indiana determine the use of force for police officers. Police officers have their own organization, and they determine that now? That sounds like a police state. You done took the power out of the hands of the legislatures? It sounds like a police.
Sir, I didn't do anything. The Indiana General Assembly passed a law.
Hmm.
The elected members of the House and Senate of the state of Indiana are the ones who write the laws for the state of Indiana. They're the ones who created this law.
So they gave their power away, is what you're saying.
No, they took the power from localities and gave it to a board that is made up of both civilian
a board of
members.
police, but not a board of elected officials.
You're right, yes. It's not elected
Help me,
officials.
Father.
It's civilian
Help
members.
me, Father. Help me. Help me. That's a police state.
You have state representatives. You can give them a call and tell them, because I didn't support the law. Neither did Chief Taylor, who sat on the board.
All right, do we have any other questions? We've got one in the back, please. And once again, we do have a lot of information. Unfortunately, we did kill a lot of trees, as much as I don't like to do that, but we did kill some for you. You can take that information back. You can also, if you were not able to get a copy, you can get that online. I think there's a couple of flyers back there. If you want to get in touch with the DOJ, you can scan so that you can do that. Is that correct? So that's back there as well. So we're also trying to open up that communication and dialogue in regards to the question on who is running this for cops. Kelsey just handed me this name, and I may get it wrong, but I'm going to try. It looks like it's Nazmia, all right, Nazmia Comrie is the name, and I will spell it, and I'll try to do it slowly in case you're going to try to write this down. So it's Nazmia Comrie, and that's spelled N-A, or is that a U, Kelsey? N-A-Z-M-I-A. So Nazmia, N-A-Z, as in zebra, M-I-A, Comrie, and that's C-O-M, as in Mary, R-I-E. So that's the project manager, and the email address is nazmia.comrie@usdoj.gov. And we also have a phone contact, which is 202-305-8327. Once again, 202-305-8327. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with U.S. Attorney. I've read your community engagement policy, which I think is recent, very detailed, outstanding. Just a while ago, you said something about having sort of an open door policy. You like to chat with folks, hear from folks, or something like that. You know, of course, it'd be about color of law violations or something relevant to what we're talking about or what you do. But could you elaborate on that?
Sure. I think that one of the important things that, you know, myself and other U.S. attorneys across the country are sort of charged with doing, you know, in partnership with the other people in our office, is making sure that we're getting out into the community at forums like this so that folks understand sort of what it is that we do, how we work, what our policies and priorities are, how you can share information with us, and also sort of what issues and concerns you have in your community as we're trying to figure out our prosecution and investigation priorities. You know, I have about 50 attorneys, including all of our criminal prosecutors, civil litigators, management, appellate folks, to, you know, handle federal legal matters for 60 counties covering 4.2 million people. And so in order to get information as best I can, you know, we have to try to engage with the community, and hopefully in sort of forums where we're getting a lot of different input, because at the end of the day, we work for you. You know, we are public servants. We are using authority that's been granted to us, you know, under the law, you know, by the public, you know, for the benefit of the public, to keep everybody safe, to uphold the law, and to protect civil rights. So one of the things that I've been privileged to do in partnership in this area with the CRDCs is, you know, I've been to several of the meetings now, as have, you know, others on my team, to, you know, share about sort of federal law enforcement, share about our priorities, or sort of particular issues that that community group, you know, might be interested in. If you have community groups or organizations that, you know, you think would love to hear from myself or someone in our office, our communications and community relations officer, you know, Kelsey is right here holding up her hand. Feel free to get her card. I think it's on the table in the back, and she does really a phenomenal job of getting us plugged in to events like this to be sure that the information we should be sharing with the public is getting out there, but also maybe even more importantly, that the information that you guys have for us is coming to our office.
Just briefly, so that sort of communication is only with organizations, not individuals?
No, we've got 4.2 million individuals, so I can't sit down and sort of talk with everybody, but I really, try to do my best to engage with folks, as they find them, including, I'm going to stick around for a little bit after this, so if you have something particular that you want to bring to my attention, I'll be sure to find you.
We got one in the back. Go right ahead.
Yes, I would like to say that condolences to former Police Chief James Toller. I remember he was very good at diffusing situations where there were hostages or people holed up and that kind of thing. So that was one of his definitely strong points. But condolences to his family and to his associates. But you might have covered this earlier. Is the department doing anything in terms of non-lethal ways to diffuse the situation? And if not, on a regular basis, would you consider doing that? And also trying to work with the community in terms of having people not necessarily run when they are confronted by an officer.
We do utilize less lethal weapons, and we are always on the look for new and emerging technology that allows us to do our work safely. So we use less lethal launchers. We have pepper ball guns, we have tasers, we have CS, we have batons. We use multitudes of chemical agents when necessary, especially people that are barricaded. We use de-escalation techniques, time, distance, barriers, communication, all those things when feasible. Sometimes those techniques and those tools aren't they just aren't. You don't have time to utilize those. But we're always looking for new ways to utilize that equipment and find new ways to keep our officers and, more importantly, our community safe.
So in regards to that last question, Chief, during the review, do you know, or maybe one of our federal folks can answer this, but because I know policies and procedures are part of it, do we know if items such as how to use lethal force, when to use lethal force, how to de-escalate, are those items that could potentially be part of this report? Do we know that, or is those items left up for the department, or will the report give us maybe here's some, I'll say, potential errors were made in this regard? Can you help us there?
They won't be looking at the individual actions to see if there were errors or policy changes. What they'll be looking at is our current policy, training, tactics, all those things to see whether or not we're meeting best practices around the country and make recommendations to change specific things. But having not, I don't know exactly what will be at the end of that, but they'll have access to all the data they want.
We have any other questions? There was a report that was done several years ago in Chicago, and they, for the question that we had in the back from Sister Denise, they actually covered a lot of the items that you were asking about in their report. And their report was a civilian-led report that was done in Chicago, and it identify items such as shootings, some of the things that came up tonight, the race of the individuals, gender, ages. A lot of that was documented, as well as here are changes that we recommend that could be made for the community. So from looking at that, and I encourage you all to do so, as we're looking at ways on how we can make our city a safer city, a better city for all of us, I look at that document at least as a model or a template for how we could possibly obtain what we're trying to obtain, and that is a safer community. And we can utilize what they've already done, not necessarily duplicate it, but we can at least use it as a template we can take some of the best practices out of that report, and we can maybe even use it for here in Indianapolis. I think that would serve us a long way.
There was a question in the Facebook.
Go right ahead.
What role, if any, does or will play in the IMPD study done by the group out of Oakland? I guess, what is the role that the IMPD will play in that?
The project they're talking about with the individuals out of Oakland deals with the peacemakers and the interventionists and the Office of Public Health and Safety intervention side of what they do, so that won't play a role in this review at all.
Okay, that was the only question.
Okay, do we have any other questions? We have anything you gentlemen want to follow up on before? Okay. All right, where's Mary Clark? Is she here? If someone can grab Mary, tell her we're just about ready for her. But we do want to share a few things. Once again, we thank all of you that have taken out of your own schedules to come and hear from us, hear from the DOJ, the FBI, and IMPD. We hope that if anything, you were able to learn a little bit more about the processes, where we're at. We want to continue to inform and educate on processes. We want to continue to be able to have open dialogue where we can have these conversations, be able to have these conversations and then walk away understanding that my voice is being heard, and hopefully we're able to do that. There are a couple of things that, once again, we had printed copies of, but if you didn't get it, we do want to go ahead and announce the IMPD Northwest District is having a recruiting open house, and that's going to be on June the 11th, 5 to 7, and that's going to be at the Northwest District headquarters, which is pretty much across the street here. And then on June the 13th, starting at 6 p.m., there is the Northwest District Task Force meeting. And this month's speaker is going to be Marion County Chief Deputy Coroner Alfie McGinty. So Alfie's going to be here speaking once again. So let's give our panelists, let's give them a round of applause for coming and sharing. Give yourself a round of applause for coming and sharing. Our law enforcement partners that are back there, once again, come on, Mary. I'm just talking, waiting on you to come on up. Once again, we want to thank our district commander, Commander Lewis, and this is our hostess, Ms. Mary Clark. She hosted us on tonight, so let's give her a clap as well.
Don't do that.
We thank them for allowing us to come into their house and make a mess and not clean up.
So I just want to say thank you for being here. This place here, in case you didn't know, is a place that's welcoming to everybody, and we hope that you feel that when you come into this space. We are a museum that celebrates all of Indiana, everyone that now calls Indiana home, no matter who you are and where you come from. This is your home. The other thing that I want to say is that we host many events here. And if you had not had a chance to walk through our museum, we're a museum that celebrates over 170 different countries. On the 22nd of June, we will be celebrating Juneteenth, which is, I like to tell people, my history. It's from slavery to Black Lives Matter. It's a powerful exhibit. I'll boast a little bit because my family's in there, including the chief of police that just recently passed, James Toller. That's my cousin. So, yeah, come through the gallery, see what we're here to offer. We're showing people that we are breaking the biases. We're teaching people that our differences aren't so different. We spend a little time talking to one another. We won't need you guys as much. I'm going to say this. My cousin, chief of police, my uncle that was part of the police department, I have a cousin. I appreciate you guys. I really, really appreciate you guys. I know that your job is not easy. I understand that. I understand that we all as a whole have a lot of work to do to break the biases that we have amongst the police and us. But I've said enough because you guys want to go home. I want to go home. Here you go.
All right, thanks again, Ms. Clark. And she had a lot of exhibits. I'm not sure if she said this, but she wants you to feel free as you're exiting, feel free to browse on your way out. So once again, we thank our panelists for coming. Look forward for the Northwest CRDC to be having future town halls with the intent that we will be giving more information. We'll hear more from you, and then we'll see ourselves as a community, growing as a community, and then moving forward from some of the unfortunate incidents that we've had in the past. And hopefully and prayerfully, those things will remain in the past, and moving forward, we can do a better job as community partners with ourselves, the community, and law enforcement. So we want to thank you all for joining us, our panel once again for coming. I want to thank my co-chair, Arnetta, she's somewhere around here, for being a runner, and Donna as well, and all of you. So we're done for the evening. We have our media here. They may ask you for some comments. Be nice to them, but be honest as far as whatever you share. Everyone, have a great evening.